Alright everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Review Diaries. I am your host, Jackie Moore, and in this episode we are going to continue off from last week and do episodes 4 through 8 of the first season of Bridgerton. I meant to split both episodes equally into two parts if you listened to last week, but for some reason I thought I had watched the first 4 episodes when I'd only watched 3. So we're just gonna have to keep rolling with it. I did think that episode 3 ended off on a nice note as far as a cutoff for episode, and I don't know if I'm overwhelming everybody with Bridgerton content, but there's other stuff that I want to do, so I don't know if I'm going to try and do 2 episodes a week just so it's not just Bridgerton content or just roll with it. I don't know. We will see how it works out, because there is a book I still want to do and then a movie that is coming out, I think, next week or something that I want to cover while it is still fresh within its like initial launch on Prime, because I think it's already been out in theaters, and it's the Anne Hathaway and Nicholas Galitzine movie that is based on the Harry Styles fanfic that everyone has just been raving about as far as the trailer, and it looks good. So I do want to recap that, but as far as when, I don't know. But we will do it. We will get to it. I really do apologize if you can hear cicadas in the background. They are just so loud right now. I mean, I can hear them through my headset, but I hope it's not picking up in the actual audio, because it's going to be really annoying, but there's not really anything I can do about it. They are just out here in full swing. I've not actually seen one in person, but I know that they look very scary and they're very large, and they just are so loud. So I hope I don't see one, because I'm just not a fan of bugs or anything like that. I've seen them like over someone's FaceTime, but not actually in person. And apparently the ones that are out right now are abnormally large and scary. So I don't want to do that. So I don't want to encounter one at all. I just hope they do their thing and then they leave me alone. So we are starting off with episode 4, and it begins with Daphne and her mother at the Queen's Palace, as they have been invited to court where Prince Friedrich has given Daphne a necklace, and as he is putting it on her, she imagines that it is Simon, and it gets like a little bit intense and sexual a little bit. She kind of has like this little dream about him as like he is putting the necklace on her, so that happens. And then in the meantime, Simon is boxing again with his friend Will, and his wife Alice arrives. So they talk about this boxing match that is happening, and Will is competing in it, obviously, and he wants Simon to bet on him because they need the money. Also, in the meantime, the Featheringtons have these older suitors show up for Marina because they want her to be married off pretty quickly, basically, just because of her situation with her pregnancy. And he is pretty degrading to Marina. I mean, he's a much older man, like literally probably in his 60s or 70s. But Lady Featherington is very insistent that Marina marries this man, or anyone really that proposes to her, just because of her situation. They want to yet again avoid a scandal, and Marina just doesn't want to do it. She wants to marry for love, and she is waiting on Sir George, who is away, even though he like quote unquote wrote those letters saying that he doesn't want anything to do with her. She is still, I guess, kind of holding out hope that he will reach back out to her. Mr. Finch arrives to court Philippa at the Featherington house, and it is just the most adorable thing, because he just arrives and says, "I'm here to court Miss Philippa Featherington," and everyone is like super shocked because they have not really had much success as far as them going out and just having success with potential suitors. They kind of are pretty outcast from society. They're a bit quirky and weird, but the girls are perfectly nice and lovely. They're not like super ugly. I mean, their mother is she's a bit much, but I think that Philippa and Mr. Finch just make like this adorable couple. He's a genuine like sweet guy, and he brings her flowers, and it's just very precious, and I love them and am rooting for them wholeheartedly. So in the meantime, Penelope and Eloise are in town, and they are yet again discussing Lady Whistledown, because Eloise is she's determined to find her. She is on a mission, that girl, I tell you. And she tells her how she wants to find out like who she is and everything. So after that, it is the boxing match, and Daphne and Anthony arrive together. So Prince Friedrich is there, and he greets Daphne. He is so nice and just genuinely interested in her, and I just feel bad for him because he's a genuinely sweet guy, and she probably could have had like a nice life with him. He's a perfectly nice guy with good intentions, and he seems sweet, but her mind of course is on Simon. So as the match is happening, Simon starts taking off his jacket, just rolling up his sleeves, and Daphne is like, she's gawking at him, and she's just very hot and bothered at the sight of it, basically, because he looks very attractive. So she and the prince in the meantime are getting to know one another a little bit more, and just their families and what they want out of life and everything. So they have like stuff in common and everything, but Simon is also like watching them from the sidelines. And Lord Featherington is at the match, and he loses out on a lot of money because he bets on the wrong person. So he owes a lot of people a lot of money after that, which comes into play later as far as his gambling and his money problems. So after the match, Simon and Anthony are talking about Simon leaving when Prince Friedrich asked to speak to Anthony, and he asked for permission to marry Daphne. So Anthony goes back to his home and tells Daphne like his intentions, and she doesn't really like know what to say, if like she wants to agree with it or not, but Anthony is basically like, just let me know what you want to do and I will handle it from there. So Daphne's mother tries to talk to her about the Duke, and Daphne just does not want to talk about it, but she reveals their arrangement that they had, that none of it was real, but you can see that it's hard for her to talk about, just because, I mean, deep down we know that there is feelings there on both sides for them, but they just have not revealed anything to one another. So the underlying tone of the whole situation being fake doesn't really convince her mother, but she lets it go just to comfort her daughter, because you can see that she is upset about it. Lady Danbury and Simon are talking as he is about to leave. So she says that he let Daphne slip through his fingers, and she brings up this point that I loved as far as the show, and it's the fact that Queen Charlotte and King Simon are a biracial couple, and that their love, they just allowed people like them to be accepted into society, so people of color, and they are no longer divided in society because of their love, since Daphne and Simon would be considered a biracial couple. And he says that love really doesn't change anything, since the king is able to kind of change his mind anytime that he pleases, even though his mind is not quite all there. If you know, you know. If you've seen Queen Charlotte, kind of what happens with King George and his mental state. If you've seen that, if not, I highly recommend you watch it. It's a just roller coaster of emotions, and I was literally just like sobbing like a baby at the last episode. I was wrecked my soul entirely. And also this point also just alludes to the fact that maybe his father cheated on his mother, which could be very possible, since he always just kind of talked about how she was just not enough, basically, and always just talk shit about both of them, really, to be honest. So Benedict is at this party or event, I think, and he meets this man who is a artist. He is a nudist painter, and I don't know if anybody else felt this way when watching the scenes between both of them together, but I don't know what it is, but there is like quite a sexual energy between the two. And at one point I thought they might have been trying to make Benedict either bisexual or gay just because of the energy. Please let me know if anybody else felt this way, because I was like, and it's not just in this scene, it's like in all of the ones that they have together. There is just something about the chemistry between those two on the screen. I was like, are we about to kiss right now? Like, I don't know. They just had me like very concerned and watching them very intently, like every single one of their moves. I was like, so yes, Benedict meets this painter and he kind of helps him discover his passion for art and kind of like maybe an outlet for what he wants to do, and also just like introduces him to all these like wild situations that kind of help him develop a little bit more as a character. I did feel like this season was like the one that was kind of used to obviously introduce all of the characters and set their storylines, which is probably why it's my least favorite, just because there was a lot going on all different sides with all these characters, and I was looking like all these different directions, and I kind of wanted to really focus on one thing, and I couldn't because something else was happening in the next scene with somebody else, and I was like, oh, I don't know. But back at the ball with Daphne and the prince and everybody, Violet, her mother, she is just stressed to the max. Like, her kids just have her like stressed beyond belief. She is just downing some drinks left and right as she is looking at all her kids, because Daphne is dancing with the prince, and then Sienna, who is a performer, she notices how Anthony just cannot stop staring at her like throughout the entire night. And even when Violet introduces him to another eligible lady that is single at the ball, he just like fully ignores her, and he's just like staring Sienna down, and his mom is like, just, poor lady is stressed. And I felt bad for her, because the next day she wakes up and she's hungover because of how many drinks she had, which is funny. But I was like, it's okay. Like, she's just worried about her kids, wants the best for them, and wants them to all just be happy and married and healthy. And I just felt horror, because she's just bearing the burden of caring for all her children herself, and there is 8 of them. So and so we also learn that Lord Featherington wants his daughters to wait until next season or further than that to have them be married, because he just doesn't have the dowry to pay for them to be married. And there's discussions like in later scenes of them even needing like dresses, because I guess for each ball you have to have a new dress, and there's like not enough money to pay for them to be made. And I think they even have like a tab at some point, and it is just being stacked, and they are not paying at the modiste because they just don't have money, and he's spending the very little bit that they have gambling, and he is not doing well. So we have the first real scene with Penelope and Colin at a ball of like them just together, and we kind of get to see their chemistry and their friendship, which is obviously a precursor to the 3rd season, and also some events in the 2nd season that lead up to the 3rd one. But they are just making jokes about people in the crowd, and then Colin asks Marina to dance, and he is just charming, and he makes her laugh and have a good time, which is nice, because Lady Featherington has just been treating her so horribly since she has arrived, and she's just been not having a very good time. And in the meantime, Daphne is having this like panic attack because she thinks that she sees Simon in the ballroom, so she just runs outside, but he's actually outside, like, I guess waiting for her, and he's waiting to say goodbye to her. So she tries to justify her choice in marrying the prince, but he says nothing, and she just runs away into a maze, and he runs after her. So at this point, they are in the maze by themselves, unchaperoned, and they start making out and they get handsy with one another. It's kind of very intense. And Anthony catches them and he punches Simon because he's obviously dishonoring his sister, and it's his job to protect her, I guess, from scandal. So he says that they will get married, but Simon refuses, so Anthony challenges him to a duel for Daphne's honor. And at this point, Lady Featherington is snooping around her husband's desk as Marina is gushing to Penelope about Colin and just basically saying how amazing he is, how attractive he is, and all this stuff. So Penelope is obviously upset at them potentially being married because she has a crush on Colin, and she always has. So Eloise visits her to kind of tell her her theories about Lady Whistledown, and Penelope says that she doesn't really care about Lady Whistledown, that she has bigger problems to worry about, getting married, and that Eloise doesn't really understand what it's like to be her because she is a Bridgerton, and Bridgertons are basically perfect and they don't really have to worry about any of that, unlike the Featheringtons, who are kind of ostracized from society. Back home at the Bridgerton house, and Anthony and Daphne talk about what happened in the maze, and Daphne doesn't like the fact that Anthony wants to duel Simon, and that he is kind of more worried about his pride rather than what she wants, really. So he says that his entire family's reputation is at risk if this comes out, and that it is putting her sisters also at risk. So Benedict walks in, and Anthony tells him that if he dies, that the estate will go to him, and that otherwise he will have to leave the country if he kills Simon. So Anthony, after this, goes to Sienna's house to tell her that he is dueling Simon and that he wants to run away with her if he survives, but she doesn't answer, and instead they just have sex. So Lady Featherington finally finds her husband's ledgers in his desk, and it details his gambling and all of his debts, and that he spent all of their money and also the girls' dowry. So they have basically during this time, if you married somebody, your family basically paid a certain amount depending on how much money they had. The dad would pay the husband a dowry every month or something, and it just depended on how much money you had, how big your dowry was. And if you had no dowry, then you were this just the worst of the worst, basically, and you would have basically zero potential to get married just because you had no money to, and it was money, I guess, to support the wife, basically. Just, I don't know, that's kind of how it worked, and what I've seen from certain movies. They talk about dowries a lot, and from what I've learned. So it is now dawn, and Anthony is at Sienna's house. So Daphne did not sleep a wink throughout the night, so she goes downstairs to Colin to find out where they're going to duel. So they ride off, since Daphne remembers that Cressida Cowper saw what happened between the two of them, because she had made a comment when she came back from the maze, and it was kind of cryptic, but she just realized it, and she is riding off to try and stop them from dueling. And Anthony also tells Benedict that he must make sure Sienna is provided for if he is to die. So they begin the duel as Daphne arrives, and she gets in the middle, and Anthony is aiming at Simon, but Simon points his gun up, and he is not trying to kill Anthony, but Anthony still shoots, and Daphne is running in between them, and as he is shooting, she gets in the middle, so he literally almost kills her. So Daphne tells Simon that Cressida Cowper saw them and that they have to marry, otherwise that she will be ruined, but he tells her that he can't marry her, and that he regards her too highly to marry her, and he insinuates that he can't give her children, which she believes means that he is infertile, but we know that it's because he doesn't want children, that he's not actually infertile, and this also comes into play later, but she tells everyone that they're to be married anyway. So the next episode begins with Daphne rushing home to take off her dirty clothes from, I guess, just riding off in the fields early in the morning, just before anyone can spot that she has not been in bed. So her mom is hungover, but Daphne tells her that she is engaged to Simon, and she kind of insinuates that something happened between them, and her mother assumes that they had sex, but says that it's fine and that she won't make a fuss about it like other people, which I think is very modern and supportive of her, and I love that because she's not really, I guess, concerned with Daphne's reputation if she is in love and happy, and if she did something that society would frown upon. So she says that her and her father also had trouble controlling their desires when they were younger, which I thought was a nice moment between them. So the queen thinks that Daphne and the prince are engaged, but she finds out through Lady Whistledown that it's actually Simon, so she is not happy about it. Not me having to charge my ring light mid-episode. Anyway, the joys of recording at home. But let me see, where did we hopefully it doesn't die because I didn't charge it much, so we will see. So because the wedding is happening so soon, in a week or so, Lady Whistledown basically insinuates that one of the reasons why they're getting married so soon is because of a scandal, which to me honestly defeats the purpose of them even marrying, because Anthony caught them, and now everyone will think it's because they had sex and that she is pregnant. So even if Cressida says that she saw them, they could have just waited it out and gotten married later, and then people would have seen that she's not actually pregnant. And I don't know, I didn't fully understand the choice of having to rush the wedding so much when she wasn't even pregnant. They didn't even have sex, they just made out, and it would have made sense to me more so timeline wise if they would have just waited, maybe yes, get engaged, but just wait. They would have seen that she would have just not grown a stomach basically, and it only really kind of adds to the scandal for them to get married, because even if Cressida talks, the town would still scandalize it, and then they would see later that she just is not pregnant. But anyway, that's not my show. But Daphne, Lady Danbury, and her mother are waiting on Simon to arrive because they're going to just promenade, and he arrives drunk. So he just looks miserable as soon as he arrives. And people that bump into them to just congratulate them on the engagement are kind of freaked out because they just tried to act happy, but Simon acts like Daphne has the freaking plague or something and doesn't even want to touch her and be near her. So people are just kind of alright. But Colin arrives at the Featherington house to bring Marina flowers, and Penelope tries to interfere in their little flirtation and conversation by basically insinuating that they have very little in common, and she tells her mother that she thinks that them courting is wrong because he is so young and is probably not seriously thinking about marriage, which could be true, but it's probably just her trying to meddle her way in since she likes him. But at the Modiste, Madame Delacroix, Cressida arrives as Daphne is getting fitted for her wedding dress, and she tells her that she saw them together, and Daphne basically tells her that she just better shut the fuck up because she will soon be a duchess, and she will be seen basically as an enemy if she says anything, since she will be a duchess, so she will be basically of just higher ranking in society, and it kind of shuts Cressida up a little bit. And then Simon and Anthony meet at a church to obtain a license for them to marry sooner, and Simon says that he will not accept a dowry for marrying Daphne, and also their special license is denied. So Lady Danbury back at the Bridgerton house says that the queen is the one who most likely was the one that denied it. So they decide to go to the palace to appeal and try to convince her that they are fully in love and that they want to marry. So after this, Simon is drunk on the street, and after being kicked out of a bar, his friend Will finds him and basically just takes him to safety. So he's just not having a very good time. As of lately, he's just been drinking a lot and being miserable over basically dishonoring Daphne and having to marry her. So Lady Featherington tells Marina that she must marry Lord Rutledge, which was the older gentleman that came in and was very rude to her, like in his 60s, and that she has to forget about Colin. And Marina says that if she marries Colin, that her family will be connected to a very powerful family, and that it would be good for her family and her girls. And she makes this kind of ploy to seduce Colin and get him to sleep with her so they can kind of, I guess, insinuate that they had sex and they must now get married. So Penelope overhears this plan and she's obviously upset about it. So then there's a scene with Queen Charlotte and King George, which kind of foreshadows the events of Queen Charlotte and his illness. And it's basically when he asks about their daughter Amelia, who had died 7 years ago, and he says that he saw her a fortnight ago, and she's like, no, she died 7 years ago. And he asks like if she killed her, and then it's a whole just very like sad scene where she basically just kind of walks away as their servants are trying to hold him down, as he is yelling at her, accusing her of killing their daughter. So back at the Queen's Palace, Daphne, Simon, their mother, or Daphne's mother, and Lady Danbury meet to plead their case with the Queen to try and appeal. So Simon basically takes the lead in the conversation and is honest with the Queen that they basically just found honest friendship with each other and that they fell in love, which is true. But Daphne kind of believes that he is lying just because he has been so unhappy with the idea of them getting married. So it's a very beautiful scene where he calls her his best friend. And I mean, he's really doing all of this for her to protect her reputation, even though he knows that he can't give her what she wants, which is a family, because that's not what he wants. But he is willing to provide and take care of her as her husband. The next scene after that is their wedding, and it's a very beautiful scene. It's shot really nice, even though there's basically no dialogue with it. We don't really get to see their vows or anything. It's kind of just instrumental, which is nice, but I maybe would have liked to see a little bit more interaction between them. But the reception is at their house, and basically everyone in the town is invited. And Cressida tells Daphne that she better remember her kindness and that she has to repay her someday, which is really kind of manipulative of her, because Daphne has never really done a thing to this girl. She didn't even want to marry the prince. He just wanted to marry Daphne, and it's just, I don't know. I didn't like it because, like I said, she's never done anything to her. She's never been mean to her. It's just pure jealousy, I think, and it was just evil of her to do that. But Marina takes Colin away at the reception to try and seduce him. They're like in this room by themselves, and poor sweet baby Colin, he is just a king. He's a gentleman, and he says that she is a lady and that he must keep their dignities intact, that he will not sleep with her. And I'm just like, what a king. He is just beautiful. And he says that he will marry her if she wants to, and she accepts. But he says that they are to marry at the end of the season, which is months away. So she would be showing a lot more if they waited months to marry. So after this, Daphne says goodbye to her family, as she is now going to live with the Duke at Cliveden House. And also Francesca is missing from all of these scenes, and I know that in the last episode it is said that she was traveling, but I don't know, I just didn't like that she wasn't there for like these big moments like her sister's wedding day. I don't know what the deal was either, if it was a scheduling conflict with the actress or what happened, but it was just weird to me that she was not in a lot of these scenes. Like, we saw her a little bit here and there in the first couple of episodes, and then she just kind of disappeared and she was not really mentioned until the very end when she comes back. So they are going to spend the night at an inn since their home is too far of a drive in the carriage. So he gets separate rooms for them, and in their own rooms, as they're like settled in, they're both kind of pacing like crazy, and she decides to open the door to go talk to him, but he is already there. So she is frustrated that he has not wanted to speak to her for the past couple of days, and he says that he can't like basically bear the misery that he has caused her, and she says it's vice versa, and he knows that she wanted like a love match and children, and he says that he can't stop thinking about her, that he burns for her, and it's this whole thing. It's very intense, and he just thinks that she doesn't feel the same, but she does, even though they haven't like, spoken about that with one another at all, really. So they kiss, and then they have sex for the very first time, and this is like a recurring thing in the next few episodes. I mean, obviously she doesn't know anything about what happens when you are married, how someone even like gets pregnant. She has like no clue. Her mother never like told her anything. So of course they're having relations, and it feels good to her. It's nice. And then obviously he finishes outside of her, so to avoid getting her pregnant, but she obviously has no clue like what that means of him like basically finishing outside of her. So after this, they arrive at Cliveden House. It's the next episode, which is, I guess, their like massive estate, and Colin also announces that he and Marina are engaged to everyone at the town, and no one is really happy at this news. His family is kind of like, what the fuck, and everyone in the town is kind of like, oh, all right, okay. So back at Cliveden House, Daphne kind of does things in this non-traditional way that the main housekeeper, Mrs. Coulson, is not used to. They're very kind of used to how things have been previously run, and I mean really just them taking care of everything. So the staff doesn't really agree with it, and then people like around the grounds that they help take care of also don't agree with some of her methods, so it's an adjustment for her. And while they are at dinner, they run off to the garden to have sex in the rain and in the gazebo, and it's basically this montage of them just like having sex in all different kinds of places, positions, everywhere, like around the house. And it is to Wildest Dreams by Taylor Swift like the instrumental version, which I thought was fun. And also at this point, Marina is basically like maybe 3-4 months pregnant, but she's still not showing like whatsoever. She doesn't really show at all really until like the very end, and I don't think she's like full term at the end, but it just shows like a little bit, and I'm just like, she shows nothing throughout like the entire season. But so we are now at the Bridgerton's house for dinner with Lady Featherington and Marina, as they are trying to convince them to have the wedding sooner, but Anthony and his mother don't agree. And also Penelope and Colin talk, and she tells him that Marina is in love with somebody else, so Sir George Crane, and it doesn't really faze Colin, but Marina tells him that she wants to be married soon, and he suggests running off and eloping. So Penelope finds Sir George's letters in her mother's desk, and she shows them to Marina so that she will not marry Colin and go after Sir George, but Marina says that it doesn't matter, and she burns the letters. And Marina realizes at this point that Penelope is in love or has feelings for Colin, and that's why she's been acting like interfering in their like courting, basically. So Penelope is kind of acting a bit childish in this season. I think it's really kind of in her own best interest, like everything that she does, but she's using Colin as like basically a disguise to hide her true desires, and Marina calls her out on it, even though she is basically trying to trap him into getting married and having a child, which is not his. So that's also childish, but I think Penelope's meddling throughout like the entire season. She's just trying to use him as like a crux to interfere just because she has feelings and is not really worried about like what makes him happy or what's best for him. Yet again, Daphne and Simon are enjoying in their like honeymoon bliss and just having tons of like sex and everything. So she realizes what Simon is doing by finishing outside of her to avoid getting her pregnant. So she goes to her lady's maid Rose and asks her like how a woman gets pregnant, and she is obviously upset that she has been deceived by his ability to have children. So in another scene later after this, they are having sex and Daphne is basically on top of him, and she basically forces him to finish inside of her to enhance the chances of her becoming pregnant, even though he repeatedly is telling her no and trying to push her off. So I know that people had strong reactions to this, justifiably, both in the book and the TV show, and it's very understandable. And I mean, they both like deceived each other, and you know, him by knowing her desires to want to have a family and like do all this stuff, and still marrying her and basically not telling her the full extent of what he wanted. So basically he is ruining her chances of wanting to have a family, and her for basically assaulting him when he said no. And obviously she doesn't understand really what any of this means, but it's not right for her to do so, just out of revenge. After this, Lady Whistledown reveals that Marina is pregnant in her column, and that she has been since she arrived in the town. So it becomes this whole thing with the Bridgertons and the Featheringtons, and it just escalates into the whole town being involved and just hating on the Featheringtons like for everything. They're not invited to a lot of events. They're kind of ostracized from society for lying to everybody and just harboring this like huge secret from everyone and deceiving the Bridgertons and Colin in this whole ruse to keep Marina's secret. So Simon and Daphne are not speaking to one another. It is now another episode, and Daphne even wants her stuff moved to another room from Simon's that they share together, but he says no, that they like have to stay together basically. But Lady Whistledown's paper arrives, and Daphne sees that Colin is mentioned in the whole scandal with Marina, so she says that she has to head home to be with her family straight away. And Simon wants to join her, and he says that it is to remain with her in case that she is pregnant. So Lady Featherington is trying to find somewhere to send Marina so she can just go off and have her baby, but no one will take her unless she gives like a very sizable donation, but of course they have no money to donate. So back at their house in London, after visiting Daphne's family, Daphne sees Simon arrive after boxing with his friend Will, and she tells him about the Queen's Luncheon that they are to attend, and they have this conversation, and then they start making out in the hallway, and they also he performs sexual acts on her on the staircase, and then when they are done, he says that they will basically lead separate lives and perform their duties as the Duke and Duchess, but they will not be together in this capacity ever again. So basically they're going to be separated. So the next day, Daphne chaperones Colin and Marina as they speak, and he asks if she is pregnant, which she confirms. And she says that she did what she must, that she had to get married, and that he basically offered her like a small glimpse of happiness. But he says that she played him for a fool and that she was very cruel, but that if she had come to him with honesty and revealed what was going on with her, that he would have married her because he loved her that much, which I thought was very sweet of him, but it probably would not have ended well anyway. But so we are now at the Queen's luncheon, and the Queen basically asks Simon and Daphne if they are pregnant, but they say that they are not, even though they are devoting time to do so. And Daphne's mother basically notices the tension between them. So at a previous ball, the Queen had spoken to Eloise about what she knew of Lady Whistledown, and at her luncheon she asked her again and basically kind of tasked her with finding out who Lady Whistledown was, since she is also just kind of on her own little mission to find out who she is. So the Featheringtons arrive at the Queen's luncheon, and everyone immediately just starts gossiping and criticizing them. And Eloise pulls Penelope aside to ask her like how she's doing and everything. And Lady Featherington also tries to speak to Violet Bridgerton, but she ignores her. And they are asked to leave the luncheon by Brimsby, who is the Queen's right hand. So Daphne walks away and her mother follows her to try and talk, and she says that her mother didn't prepare her for the realities of marriage and how any of that works, and just that she didn't know what she was doing. So she's very upset and basically a little bit raising her voice, and Lady Danbury walks by as they are talking, and Daphne just kind of walks away. So she goes to the Featherington house to speak with Marina, and Marina tells her about Sir George and how she got pregnant. So Daphne asks for Sir George's surname to see if they're able to find him and make him take responsibility, even though Marina thinks he doesn't want to be found because of the letters Lady Featherington forged. So meanwhile, Anthony and Simon get into this big fist fight as they are talking about what's going on, and they kind of butt heads. So he lies to Daphne when she returns home and says that it is from training with Will, but she helps clean up his wound anyway, and they have this little moment and they kiss. So she asks him why he won't open up to her, and that a child would be a blessing to the both of them, but he tells her about his vow to not have a child. He tells her about his father's efforts for the line to continue and how little he cared about him and his mother. And she doesn't really agree with his reasoning, but says that he betrayed her in the marriage bed. And at this point, Marina is finally starting to show a little bit that she is pregnant. But in the meantime, Daphne and Simon pretty much ignore each other the whole time that they are in London, as Lady Whistledown is speculating if Daphne is pregnant or not. So Eloise is trying to find out who Lady Whistledown is with Penelope, and Eloise will be attending a concert even though she is not out in society. And then Marina is making a tea to induce losing her baby. I'm trying to find the best wording for it, but she basically drinks the tea and goes back to her bed, and Penelope finds her. And at the concert, Daphne feels either her period coming on or her losing a baby if she is pregnant. I didn't quite know which of the two it was, just because there was quite a lot of blood for it to be her period, but it could be. And then her mother comes in to comfort her as she is basically kind of really upset and crying. And the last shot that we see is Simon kind of emotional and crying. And so the last episode, a lot is happening at this point with all these people. But Marina thinks that the tea that she drank worked because she does not feel the baby move. And then a caller basically arrives at the Featherington house, and it is Sir Philip Crane, who is Sir George's brother. and he reveals that Sir George died in the battlefield a few weeks ago. So he asked Marina to marry him to basically kind of fulfill his brother's wishes to take care of Marina and her child, but she rejects his offer, saying that she does not know the man or love him. And she also tells Lady Featherington that she is no longer with child and that there's no need for any of these like schemes to marry her off. So Sienna and Anthony both spot each other at another boxing match, and she is with somebody else, yet they go under the bleachers to have sex with one another. And then Daphne learns of Simon's trouble with speaking as a child, and because she finds the letters that he wrote to his father when he was a child. And Lady Danbury tells her basically a little bit more about his history with his father and all she kind of did to help educate him and just kind of take care of him when his father wouldn't do so. So after this, Daphne and Simon have breakfast together, and Daphne tells him that Francesca has returned from holiday and asks if he wants to join her, so he does. And it's a very cute scene with the entire Bridgerton family as Francesca is playing the piano and Colin is singing, which I thought was very adorable. And Penelope comes in as she discusses Lady Whistledown with Eloise. And then in the meantime, at the Featherington house, they all got new dresses that came in since they now have money again from Lord Featherington's gambling, and Marina feels something wrong. So they go to the doctor and he tells her that she is still pregnant. And then after this, Anthony asks Sienna to join him for the last ball of the season, which is hosted by Daphne and Simon at their London house. So the Featheringtons arrive, and of course everyone kind of immediately starts gossiping about them, even though Daphne personally extended an invitation to them previously. But in the meantime, Lord Featherington is celebrating his win at the boxing match, but the men that he gave the deed to the house initially asked to meet him. And then at the ball, Colin sees Penelope and he apologizes for what he said when she was trying to protect him from the Marina situation, and she says that she has to tell him something, but he says that he is leaving to travel, and she basically dismisses that she was going to tell him something, which I presume was to just reveal her feelings to him. When she hears that he is leaving, you can see that she is visibly choked up, and she wishes him well as she is leaving. And then Brimsley tells Eloise that they found where Lady Whistledown prints her columns, and that she basically waits until big events like tonight's ball to avoid being spotted. And Eloise thinks that the modiste, Madame de la Croix, and the Queen, and Eloise thinks it's the modiste and that the Queen wants to silence her. So Anthony, in the meantime, goes to Sienna's house to pick her up for the ball, and a man answers the door, and she says that she can't go with him, that she has to look out for herself. And I really do like Sienna's character. I wish we would have seen more of her in the second season, just because I love that she stood her boundary with Anthony and chose herself in this moment, because even though you can see that Anthony cares, they would not have really been able to have had like a really good life together if they chose to either run away or be married in London, just because of her social standing and like who he is. I mean, he is like a viscount of one of the most prominent families in the town, and she is, I mean, I know I said previously that it's kind of insinuated that she's a prostitute, which she could be, but she's also like an opera singer. And he has like responsibilities that are too big and just much bigger than like what she can handle or she is comfortable with. And his life is basically going to balls with like all these rich people, and that's not like the kind of life that she lives. And she would have had to really kind of conform to his life and like what he wanted for her, and that's not what she wants for herself. So in the long run, they just probably would not have been happy with one another. So I think it was best that she kind of cut things off and find somebody that is more suitable for her and that would have probably been able to give her a very happy life where she could have been a little bit more independent and happy. So we're at the printers with Eloise that she is waiting for Lady Whistledown to arrive, and she sends her carriage away as someone is trying to expose her because they run up, and she basically sends them away. So Daphne and Simon at the ball basically keep stealing glances at each other, and Lady Danbury talks to him and says that pride is going to make him lose everything in his life. And it is this beautiful scene between Daphne and her mother as they talk about her relationship with her father, and she gives her advice a little bit and tells her how much she misses him, and that loving each other was really a choice every day, and that their marriage did have its challenges, but that they chose each other and fought through it. So Daphne and Simon dance to Max Richter's recomposition of the Four Seasons by Vivaldi, and it starts raining in the ballroom, and it's an open ballroom, so there's like no roof on it, so everyone kind of starts getting wet. And Lady Danbury, the icon that she is, dismisses everyone so Daphne and Simon can have their epic moment in the rain. So really it was giving Pride and Prejudice in this moment because it's just raining. So she says that she found the letters that he wrote to his father as he apologizes to her, but she reassures him that she loves him for who he is, even if he thinks that he is not perfect, but she does. And it's really kind of a beautiful moment because you can see the relief and the realization in his face that it is okay to love even though he is not perfect in spite of what his father had told him. So the Featheringtons arrive back home after the ball, and every one of their servants is kind of waiting for them, and they tell him that Lord Featherington is believed dead. So she goes to his desk, and all of the money that they had in there was gone, so they are now broke again, and her husband and the girl's father is also believed to be dead, so they basically have nothing. So it is after the ball, and Daphne and Simon basically reconnect and have sex again. And Colin is leaving the next morning to go travel as Penelope is watching from her room across the street and crying. And Eloise thinks that she is crying because her father is dead, which could be true, but I think it's really more about her being upset about Colin leaving. So Marina asks Lady Featherington how she could endure 22 years of marriage with somebody without having loved them, and she gives her basically advice on how to do so, that she will basically be able to educate time to either her children or just learning to love parts about the person with time, and that she just will be able to with time just learn to tolerate it basically. And she is also leaving to get married to Sir Philip, and there is someone who is to inherit the Featherington estate now that he is dead, but that is revealed in the next season. So basically it doesn't go to the wife, it goes to somebody else in the family. I think it's a cousin or something. And so the Bridgertons bid goodbye to Colin and wish him well on his travels, and Daphne and Simon decide to stay in London a little bit longer, and Anthony reveals his intentions to find a Viscountess next season and marry, so that he is no longer wanting to distract himself from his responsibilities and basically do well by his family. So Benedict was with the modiste the last night during the ball, so therefore she is not Lady Whistledown, but it is revealed that it is in fact Penelope Bridgerton, which I thought was interesting because in watching it again, I mean, we kind of see little clues here and there of like why she is Lady Whistledown. I mean, every time that her and Eloise talked, she'd be kind of like giggling a little bit and basically talking. Anytime that Eloise would talk to her about Lady Whistledown, she'd kind of giggling a little bit, and we maybe might have thought that it was like for some other reason, but probably in her brain she was thinking how it was funny, like all these reasonings that Eloise was coming up with. And I think it's also just like great for her to beat it because she is seen as like such a little soft-spoken wallflower, kind of always in the background listening, but sometimes like that's the best way to be honest, because you can just observe everything. And yeah, I'm just excited to see how it pans out, like in further seasons. I know how it develops a little bit more in season 2, but especially with her season 2, I want to see how that comes into play, and just to see her grow. Basically, I'm very excited. She's like honestly one of my favorite characters, so it's just nice to see that she has like a bigger part to play in all of this. And so we have a flash forward to some months later. I don't know exactly how many, but it is Daphne giving birth to her and Simon's son. And Simon is able to hold his son for the first time, and it is honestly a very beautiful moment. And I mean, his line will continue, and he follows in the footsteps of the Bridgerton household by starting their tradition to name their children alphabetically, which I thought was a very nice touch. I thought that was sweet. So the last shot of the season is a bee on the windowsill, which is basically a motif to next season, but also a symbol of their father always being there. It is explained a little bit more in season 2, like that with the bee and everything. But yeah, that is season 1 of Bridgerton. I don't know. In having watched season 2 already, like season 2 is my favorite one so far, because I think I've said previously that I think season 1, and I mean I really think that's with every show, but the first season is really kind of just establishing everyone's characters, and there's just like a lot going on. And I did like Daphne and Simon together, but I just didn't feel as like excited for them. I thought they were nice and cute and sweet, but it just, season 2 did it for me. I swear, their chemistry between Anthony and Kate Sharma was just perfection. And I'm very excited to recap season 2 and also just watch season 3, just because it's been so long and such a big anticipation. So yeah, thank you for joining me if you have listened thus far. I know that this will probably be a very, very long episode, so I have a lot of work to do, but yeah, thank you so much. And then as far as next week, still deciding what I want to do. Might do 2 episodes, I don't know. There's just so much in my brain that I want to do in so little time, but I hope that you guys have a great rest of your week, and please follow me on social media. I have everything linked below. If you haven't seen the first episode of my Bridgerton recap with episodes 1 to 3, I will list it in the description, and then also link it in the, I guess, end card of the YouTube, and also just link it in the episode notes for the podcast. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed, and just stay tuned for more content. I don't know what exactly that will be, but that is just how it is every week. So yeah, thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Bye.